Welcome back to another episode of Better Catholics. Today we have a very good topic. This is, I think, very relevant in so many levels because people ask about this a lot, and we have a special guest with us also today, but I'm not going to introduce her. Bishop Ryan will be introducing her this time. So, Bishop Ryan.
Thank you, Father Melvin. I'm happy to introduce to all of you Miss Betty Terlahi. Betty is an alumnus of Mount Carmel School. I don't know what class, maybe a younger class than our previous guest, but Betty is also a graduate of Seattle University, and she has really an extensive background in accounting and finances. And I recall in 2010, when I was appointed apostolic administrator, one of the things that we really needed in the diocese was to have a finance officer who has the right background on finances. And so Betty was recommended, and she humbly took the position in 2011. And at that time, there were a lot of to-do lists that we had to do. And so today's episode is really a way for us to inform the people on, the simple things and perhaps basic things that we do as a church. Collection, the limosnia, the Sunday collection, the mass intention. So Betty knows the ins and outs of our finances. She knows how much is our salary, our stipend, and all of that. So to this day, Betty helps us all our parishes. So is there anything else you want to add about your background, Betty? You're a mother, a wife, a good Catholic, a better Catholic, as this program is all about.
Well, I'm a parishioner myself. That's important. So I see it from the other side too. And so when we're talking about accountability of funds, we're talking about the faithful parishioners' money. And I'm one of them, right? So putting it to good use and accountable use is my priority as well, because then it makes me comfortable to continue also to donate and give what I can, especially on Sundays, which most of the collections come from.
And this is the question that a lot of people ask, where does the money go? Can you enlighten us about the in and outs of the funds that we collect from people, the donations that we collect from people? Is it really spent like recklessly? Some people would be tempted to think that, the money is spent by the priest for his personal agenda, vacation, or these are misconceptions, real misconceptions that a lot of people have. Can you enlighten us with?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, if you see a priest spending, I'm pretty sure that's not coming out of the diocese or the parish, unless it is an activity of the parish. But if you see a priest having a nice meal at a fancy restaurant, I mean, most likely the person he's having a meal with is probably sponsoring it or treating it. So and priests are just as allowed to have their own money and buy their own goods. They're humans just like us, and they also like have preferences of what they want to wear and what kind of shoes they buy, and they want a bag or something like that. But as far as the church is concerned with the diocese, the money that comes in primarily goes to the parish. There's a percentage of the parish funds that's assessed that goes to the mother church, that goes to the diocese. The diocese then takes what's called a average Sunday of the collection of each parish.
Right.
And that goes in to fund the operations of the diocese. Now, the diocese being the overall mother, I'd hate to confuse it with the cathedral, but the diocese overseeing all the parishes, the umbrella of all the parishes, has to take care of its own needs as well. If you don't have a diocese, then you don't have a parish, right? Correct. And so the diocese doesn't have mass itself. And so there is an average collection from each of the parish every month that goes to the diocese to fund the operations of the diocese. Now, the diocese will fund things like the curia, the bishop's operation,
Mhm.
which the bishop can then plan programs
Mhm.
to continue to train its priests, continue to bring in um, trainers to help the priests be able to go out and spread the good news, right?
Right,
And
right.
administer their parishes. There's other needs. There's the assistance that we get from like the pastorelli sisters.
Mm.
We also umbrella other things like we administer for Caridad. I mean, not a lot of funds
Right.
go to all of these things, but
Mhm.
it takes funds to run that operation, meaning an
Mhm.
office, the staff that run the office, the CCD program. Although it's everything is administered down at the parish level,
Right.
it takes money to put the program together
Yeah.
so that it's carried out by the branches, which are the parishes.
Right.
And so there's funding that's needed to put all these plans together.
Mhm.
The bishop, I know, had started last 2 years ago his plan for his pastoral plan,
Mhm.
and that took several committees to put together. But the planning stages of hosting and gathering these committees,
Right.
although they're volunteers, it entails expenses.
You're right.
Making booklet of the plan, right? Um, Sharing the plan with the faithful,
Mhm.
and these things are copied. We used to do the what is it? The star. What do we call our North Star?
North Star,
Yes,
yeah. Or diocesan paper, which was
Uh-huh.
printed weekly.
printing. So
Yeah.
that's one of the items that needed to be cut
Mhm.
because we were not generating enough funds anymore for that.
Mhm.
It takes the bulk of the operational funds. I understand when you get less advertisements and less, support there, then now it becomes a burden on the diocese itself. Then there are other things that retirement. There's of the priests. There is a lot, and some of it is still built down to the parishes.
Right.
There's a portion that's covered by the diocese. And there's other things that I can't think of right now,
right.
but yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of things that I know the diocese would like to do.
Yeah, but
And-
even recruitment of priests, because in our
Yes.
diocese, majority of the priests, like Father Melvin, it's you belong to a religious congregation, which is you better
The
tell us
Adorno
so that
Fathers,
you're
clerics,
superior.
regular, minor.
yeah, and so when we request for help from dioceses or from religious or congregations, that also entails some expenses, and
Right.
especially for example, if a priest from the Philippines from a diocese, we process the religious visa. And all the costs that's involved in there, and there are many other
Yeah.
operations.
So that's a lot of operations. I mean, and I believe the diocese gets only 10%. The parish assessment
20,
uh,
21, 22%.
percent of the
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So
Which is
that's
still not
very small considering the
yes.
amount of
It's still not
of
sufficient.
programs that the diocese have.
I like Father Melvin already. He's the only priest who said it's
Said-
very small.
Yeah.
Because in actuality, there are actually our brother priests, and rightfully so, they would question, like, how come it's this percentage,
Right.
right? And if you really know, as Betty has explained, where the money goes,
Mhm.
and we're required to do an annual audit.
Mhm.
That's part of the requirement. So that makes us also confident that our procedures and processes are done in the right way.
Mhm.
But I guess when you talk about stewardship, and accountability, and it really is important for us to realize that our belongings, our resources are gifts from God, right? The donations that we receive, the collections that are out there on Sunday Mass. And so it's important that as good stewards, we take good care of this God-given gifts, because, practically, you cannot, the church needs resources. We cannot do our work without resources. So when we have people like Betty, Sherwin, the many volunteers in the parishes, in the finance council, We also have our diocesan finance council. So there are structures in place that would help us do checks and balances.
Right. On a parish level, of course we spend because me being one of the administrators of the churches here in the diocese, I look at the financial statement every month. I would ask the office to secure me a copy of the financial statement. I would look at it and said, "Oh gosh, we overspent again. We overspent again." But when I looked at the things that we spent on, this is really not like we're using the money for for something extravagantly and outrageously out of control, um, irresponsible. This is we have to spend for our utilities, which is about 20% of our expenditures. Um, we have the diocesan assessment, of course. We have the CCD programs, that we spend on, and the church supplies alone. I mean, we underestimated the budget for the church supplies, but we actually overspent. At least that this is in San Jude, and we still need a lot more. So we have to really adjust our budget proposal for next year. What I'm saying is that, like you said, there are a lot of things that we spend the money on that is really very responsible kind of spending. We cannot um, uh, really go irresponsible on our spending because we know where the money is going. We have to be very sensitive to the people who give to the church, and people are very generous.
Yeah.
And that's why, as much as possible, we would give the people a copy of the financial statement,
Yes.
so that they'll know where the money is going.
And talk about being responsible. And Betty was really very instrumental, helpful in helping us improve our practice here. Because before, finances, accounting were done in a parish level. So say, for example, you're at San Jude. So you would do your own books, your own accounting and all of that. And what we did then, like we noticed some discrepancies in some parishes. And so in order for us to really be able to have checks and balances, we then decided, with the advice of the finance council, to do what we call the diocesan level, a centralized
Yes.
accounting.
Centralized,
And perhaps
right.
Betty, you can share, because that was for me a very important shift. I recall, like I says, Betty, one parish, they don't have money anymore to pay their utility bills.
Mhm.
And
Right.
only because already, our people really look up to priests. They trust so much,
That's right.
but there were already like pre-signed checks. And that we cannot do that. We have our policy
Yeah.
not to do that. So by doing centralized accounting, I want my brother priests to be more focused on the spiritual and pastoral work. And there are many lay people, competent lay people, who are willing to help us do that part of church administration.
Yes.
That's right. So yes, there was a decision made to centralize the accounting, and it was primarily to help the parish priests, and not have to worry. I mean, they're when your background's not finances, it's not that you don't care, but it appears that way because you don't see the need to record certain transactions. And when you start to question months and years later, it's like there's no record or there's no recollection of what the money was used for. And at that point, it then appears as if the money was misspent, when in fact, probably likely wasn't, right? So we decided that we needed to put strict policies in place so that the accounting of our finances were accounted for in a proper manner, and that we could produce financial statements. In fact, that was something we needed to comply with as well with Rome, is to produce a overall financial statement. And that was something we couldn't do at the time. I believe at the time it could have been to avail of some grants or things like that. And grants are really important. And I know I'm probably jumping here, but I do want to point out that that although we do an assessment with the parish, the diocese cannot operate on the assessment alone.
Right.
We get a good amount from grants, and without the grants, we'd have to let go of the few people we have because it's hard to get a full-time committed employee,
Right.
but pay very entry level because although we're the church, they also have their livelihood and they got to go out and meet, the needs of their family, right? And that's why when Bishop once asked if I could work full time here, there was a little hesitation.
I remember Judge, it's like our legal counsel says, first of all, Ryan, you can't afford Betty. But Betty has always been helpful. I would always bother her, and we have had a lot of challenges in the past. You talk about grants. I think it's important for our people also to know that we've been really blessed to receive a lot of help from outside. When I say outside, not from within the CNMI. Say, for example, annually, we apply for that grant from the U.S. Bishops' Conference, the Catholic Commission. And one of the requirements in getting that grant is for us to comply with the annual audit. If you don't have a sound, a good audit report,
right,
you're disqualified. You cannot apply for a
That's
grant.
right.
And that's been, I think it's safe to say, our bread and butter.
Yeah.
There was a time when there was like, I think, was it the huge hurricane in the States that their funding was, reappropriated to the needs of there was a drastic cut in the grant that we received. We were affected. The other one is Catholic Extension that really helps us fund for programs. We have had youth camps, other ministries that we have. I mean, even the diaconate program. So Catholic Extension, they've been very helpful to us to this day. And then also as a mission diocese, we're part of Propaganda Fide in Rome. So we also get help from Propaganda Fide on an annual basis. So all in all, these three funding sources that we get, I would say, I don't know the percentage, but really help us in terms of our operation in the diocese.
Yes, I mean, when COVID hit, if I may go there, we had to sit and discern over letting go of some employees that were not covered under the grant, because at that time we were concerned about the stability of the diocese financially, because knowing we were not hosting masses in person, that means we were going to forego collection for that one whole year. And so that is a big hit. I mean, it was a big impact to the diocese. And so that's when we had to make decision to let some staff go. And the bishop had the biggest decision, and it wasn't an easy one.
Well, you were with me. I was just, Betty, I want you to be next to me when, you talk about the life, our staff, they also have their own families, the livelihood. So it's not easy, but at the end of the day, you have to make that decision and look at the bigger picture, what's for the overall good of the church, of the diocese. Yeah.
And it was in their best interest that we also let go rather than cut hours, because then they can avail of benefits from the CARES Act, like the PUA and and so we had to weigh that out. And I said, if you hold them, they're not going to recover as much. We have to let them go because you can't afford them, one, and two, they can avail of the benefits of being unemployed due to COVID. So, there was a lot of things to consider.
Yes, good. And the other thing, Betty and Father Melvin, that perhaps would be helpful for our parishioners is to talk a bit about, how much does a priest get? If you're assigned at the cathedral, it's a bigger structure, bigger building. Do you get more in terms of your honorarium, your salary, than compared to being assigned perhaps in the Goat Island, for example? But I think it's important for us also to be transparent and accountable that all of us, whether you're assigned in a smaller or a bigger parish, we all receive the same. And perhaps, Betty, you can help us shed light about this structure because I recall when we had one of our meetings in the region, I shared about this model. Like in other places, there's even like a sense of, oh, I wanted to be assigned in a bigger parish because the collection is more. But for us, it doesn't matter
Yes.
because we
because
all
it's
receive this
centralized.
centralized. We all receive the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, even when I first came into the diocese where I work full time, if you're in an acting role and you've held on the additional responsibilities, after so many months, you get additional pay, right? And so when that topic was raised at the time, I was working with Bishop, who was only the apostolic administrator at the time, kind of said, does he get an adjustment for being an apostolic administrator? I mean, as far as I was concerned, he had been in that role already for some time. And I didn't bring it up to him, but it made me ponder, right? And I realized that, and then I go back and I realized even the bishop before him, there were no such adjustments. There was no HR rule or benefit as such that because they were priests, it was just enough to get them by. And to be honest, I think maybe even that's one of the reasons we don't easily convince
Young people.
because the sacrifice is more than just sacrifice of being a religious, but sacrifice of finances.
Right,
It's a big. So the priests get very little. I mean, on top of it, they're taken care of, that's where your money's going. The faithful, they drive cars because they get to the parishes. They go visit the sick. They attend to emergency calls. And when we say emergency calls, it's not just sick. It could be mental health issues, domestic violence, things like that. And the cars have to be available to serve the community because that's what the priests are there for, right? The diocese. And then there's cell phones. No cell phone, we can't call you.
Right.
It's in
the
an
middle of the
emergency,
night.
right? Middle of the night. So there's cell phone expenses. And even with gasoline, we limit it. Anything after a certain amount is supposed to be a deduction on the priest's stipend. But I think everybody's complying and falling within their budgeted allotted amount. And then there's housing, of course, utilities. We got to take care of our priests. That's the sacrifice, right? They make, and so the diocese has to give back, and all I think the diocese is asking is to keep them comfortable so they can serve the community. And it's not cheap. Maintenance of housings, right? Or else it'll dilapidate. Maintenance of the church. That's a lot of the money that we collect at the parish level is just for reoccurring expenses. There's really not enough to put away into some golden pot for a rainy day. It's just enough to hold us up. And like COVID, we had enough to see maybe the next 10 months, 1 year. Fortunately, we hold on tight enough that when we didn't have face-to-face masses, we were able to continue to carry through and provide services online, and be able to attend to the sick and the other issues that we have to attend to without the steady income coming in. Fortunately, I believe we had some grantors that had commitments and they continued to drop off their donations. But that wasn't the bulk of it. The bulk of it was the Sunday collections. And when you don't have mass, then you don't have collections. So, but the priests get very little. That's their allowance. And I like to share a time when collections really dropped quite, it dropped some. And I think the economy was kind of in a cripple at the time. And we were seeing the government had implemented austerity measures and they were cutting 8 hours off of the employees. And the private businesses were letting go of some of their staff, cutting hours as well. And we saw a significant drop in the collections and we started to monitor it. And it got to a point where we hit the red with regards to the stipend that we're allowed to give to, because per canon law, we cannot pay more than what we collect for mass offerings. They got to the point where we were paying more. So with that, we have to analyze how much we overspent. and we had to reduce the stipend that we were giving our priests. And it wasn't taken very well. I mean, half of them understood, and the other half, although they understood, it was a hit for them. They have their own transactions. They have loans themselves. And so it was really hard, but we didn't have a choice. And so we had to make that cut. And it was a good cut. It was almost 25% of what they were, the little amount that they were already earning. And, as things got better, we implemented it back and we gave back. And there was 1 year when the people were very generous and the mass offerings were really high. And I think we were able to kind of compensate back for that cut that we made. But just like any other business, when you make reductions in salary, we're doing that in here too.
Yes.
Yeah, we're doing that in here too.
Yeah, and it really is also important to emphasize that, by doing that, adjusting also to, how our community is doing when government had to reduce number of working hours, we are also affected, right? It doesn't mean that just because we're not a government entity or businesses are business is not good, we are affected. We are, because we are a donation based organization. We rely on help from people, on their goodness, on their generosity. So it's also important to make sure that we do our best to take care of those gifts that have been entrusted to us.
The dynamics of the religious priest and the diocesan priest is definitely different. For us, we look at the check, we receive the check, we look at the check, and then we deposit it to the bank. We don't see it again.
That's right.
So that's for us religious. For the diocesan, however, of course, you have to consider that they have their own personal needs that they have to provide. And so they really need to be given a decent amount of financial support so that they can survive each day, so that tomorrow he can be ready again to serve. So it's good that you said that the priests are getting really just enough. Just about you putting it in my own words, it's just enough really to get by. Maybe a little bit of savings too, if
Yeah, I mean, I think the generosity outside of that is what really holds a priest up. So if there's a baptismal and there's a little gift on the side of $20 or $50, whatever, however generous the parents of the child is, then that's really how the priest can do extra. What they earn doesn't get them far at all from the diocese. I mean, it's enough to get them some shampoo, deodorant, a pair of shoes on an occasion, but other than that, it really doesn't go far. I believe it's designed to just keep them a little bit under that comfort level, but enough to survive.
Right.
And so, is there a reason? Maybe there is, I don't know who was it. You on Sunday that said if you're too comfortable, then
that was him.
Yeah, I remember
that was him. That was Father Melvin.
Yes. And so I'm thinking that's the same thing. It's to not make them too comfortable. Otherwise, the purpose of their vows,
ministry.
can be forgotten, right? Or,
And Betty, we have really been blessed by the goodness and generosity of the people. And even though you're here, Father Melvin, for like almost a year now, 11 months, I'm sure you've witnessed, you've experienced that too.
I have. Yeah.
So I don't think you see a priest who would go hungry.
No. We're taken care of.
We're taking care. We are really grateful. There was even I don't know, maybe it was me who made that comment, if you just know how to smile and be nice to people, they would be nicer to you. They would be kinder to you.
Yeah.
And that's the culture here. We take care of our priests. So we will invite you to our events and all that. And, and in return, we want the priest to spend time with the family or things like that. So, and I think it's the same in the Philippines and
Yes.
other parts of the world, but not everywhere where you have a lot of fandango and,
Mhm.
Yeah.
batismo and right. It's here we do that a lot, even during COVID.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if during this COVID, I know by the end of the year we're going to like look back and assess the financial statements, and I know last year we really saw the decrease
Decline.
because we closed churches for 3 months. Towards the end of March, the entire month of April, and then towards the end of May. So these are the realities, and but looking back, yeah, we had to make difficult decisions, letting go of people, cutting down, and really just keeping what is to the bare, essential. But today, I I still am grateful. I feel good that by and large, we're still here. We're able to. We're still blessed.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah. So in short, we're not really spending recklessly the money of the church and the goods of the church. And if in a few words, if you can say something to reassure our viewers and our listeners about the in and outs of the funds in our church, that would give them some sense of assurance. Because I don't want to really say it because I'm a priest. I don't want to sound biased, but coming from a lay person who understands how the finances goes in the church, maybe you can say something reassuring to our uh, people, our listeners, our viewers.
Sure. I when I came in, I didn't understand the operations of the diocese, and it's not something that's out there that everybody would understand what goes on inside. But after going through the details of where our funding goes and what we need to pay and what is used, and the bishop knows that I've not held back questioning certain things and how it's used and how we could justify it, and perhaps even that it's not, that I feel it's not justified.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, the bishop has full responsibility and accountability of the funds, and he has people below him to help him discern how it should be spent. And it's not just, like someone like me or even his finance officer. He has the Diocesan Finance Council who meet quarterly, and sometimes more than even sooner. But at every Diocesan Finance Council meeting, the expenses and the financials are shared. It's put up on a board, it's shared on a financial statement, and they can question everything. And in fact, they have. And sometimes they will say if they don't agree with it and they want to go a different route. And in fact, sometimes they don't approve the budget.
Yeah.
They've asked Bishop, can we table this for now? I don't feel that's the priority. And maybe we could visit it at our next meeting. And as always, Bishop saying, okay, I accept that decision and we move on. And the next meeting we have, sometimes it's the same person who would bring it up, or the bishop would say, is this the right time to revisit this item? So your funds, your donations are accounted for, and it's being used to the best interests of the diocese and the faithful. And I always remind the priest when I was the finance officer that this is not our money. This money does not belong to the diocese. So it's as an entity. It belongs to the faithful members of the diocese, which is every parishioner, every person that walks, every Catholic that comes into our church and gives a little. That's your money, and that you entrust the bishop and his staff to use it in the best interest of the diocese. And I can say that I have seen how to minuscule expenses are looked after and being put to good use, including the Catholic Charities Appeal, which is our annual appeal for donations. And even that is restricted.
Mhm.
And it's restricted for purposes like education or seminarians. I think
Mhm.
recently we've had one graduate, and that's to come back and serve
Mhm.
the faithful, serve the parishioners.
Right, right.
And so, if you have any doubts, you can come talk to me when you see me, and I will
Yeah.
assure you that, and it has come up.
Right.
People do come up to me and
Yes.
say, "Can you look into this? Because I heard that this is what's going on,"
Mhm.
and I would raise it, and Bishop knows that I would,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
I'd say, "Hey, well, I'd like to look into this," and a lot of times it's misconception, it's a misperception of what they saw, and it being justified, and so, um, but if you feel that something is wrong, then they should raise
Right,
it,
right.
right?
Mhm.
Because that adds on to the accountability.
Mhm.
But now we have so much accountability policies in place.
Right.
It's difficult to lose money that way.
Yes.
And it allows the people who want to spend it to think and use it wisely.
Mhm.
And that's what's the benefit that's happened over the last 10 years, maybe. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And thank you, Betty. We are blessed. Our diocese is blessed to have people like Betty and the many volunteers in every parish. From following the counting procedures after mass. You
Right.
see that in your parish, like the people who are there, they count, they sign their name, and
Right.
somebody would verify, and no two related persons count, and somebody's in charge of depositing, and signatories and all of that. These are protocols, in place to help us be good stewards.
Mhm.
So to the many people out there in every parish, we always have good-hearted people willing to give their time and assistance in ensuring that we do practice
Mhm.
stewardship, that it's a way of life, it's a way of who we are. Because if we don't take care of these gifts, then we won't be able to do our mission, our role. So thank you, Betty. And I
Right,
think you have the final word. You're in charge of this.
Well, overall, the bishop is our steward. Is the overall steward of the church, of the goods of the church. We are, as priests and deacons, we are helping our bishop to really help in the administration of the church goods. And we have Betty, of course, who uh, offer her time to help also. So we are very grateful to the people who are listening to us. I hope that you are all informed, enlightened, and hopefully we were able to offer you some kind of uh, assurance that we, as your stewards of the goods of the church, we are doing our best to become responsible and to be transparent as well. Um, Together, if we do this, we will be able to build a really trustworthy church, a responsible church, and with its members being better Catholic.